Undercover boss orders breakfast at his own restaurant. Freezes when waitress complains about tips. Some truths are invisible until you're standing on the other side of the counter. The early morning light washed over the storefront like any other day golden. And sleepy. Familiar. Maple and Main Diner had his family name in the lease. But today, no one inside would know. The man with salt and pepper stubble and work boots had signed their paychecks for the last 6 years. Brian Whitaker walked through the door as Gus, a quiet, slightly weary traveler just passing through. The bell above the door gave a cheerful jingle that didn't match the heaviness in his chest. He scanned the diner. He once opened with trembling hands and big dreams. Now, it was just one of 30 locations, run mostly by regional managers and monthly reports. He used to know everyone's name. Today, no one even looked up. There was a smell of burnt toast and overworked coffee pots. A waitress brushed past him with a forced smile and tired eyes. The booth cushions had a new tear. The specials board still listed Tuesday's blueberry pancakes even though it was Thursday. He took a seat near the back, quietly observing. He thought he came here to blend in to see how things were running. Maybe find a few training gaps. But something felt off. Not in a corporate way, in a human way. And then, from 2 booths over, he heard it. A voice, frustrated and raw. It wasn't meant for him, but it would change everything. If stories like this move you, consider subscribing. What happens next will stay with you. The coffee in Brian's chipped ceramic mug had long gone lukewarm, but he barely noticed. His ears locked in on the conversation unfolding just 2 booths away, hidden only by the low hum of the diner and the clink of silverware. I'm just saying, it's not fair. The voice was sharp at the edges, but muffled with exhaustion. You want me to smile all day? Handle 5 tables at once. Refill coffee. Clean puke off the bathroom floor and then tell me I gotta be grateful for $3 tips. Brian blinked. It was the young waitress who had taken his order. Her dark brown curls frizzed from the morning rush. Apron slightly stained from a spilled side of jam. And Amatak read Lena. She stood at the service station beside the soda machine, venting quietly but fiercely to the busboy. A lanky teen who avoided eye contact like it was a game. I just want to make rent this month, without crying in my car. Is that too much? Lena mutred, tugging at the frayed strap of her apron. Corporate raised menu prices again, but we didn't see any of that. Customers tip less, 'cause their eggs cost $2 more. And guess who eats the blame? Brian felt his stomach twist. He'd seen the profit margins on paper. He'd signed off on the price hike. It made sense in the Office of Labor Costs. Inflation. Vendor fees. But from where he sat now, it sounded like betrayal. The busboy mumbled something inaudible. Lena huffed and leaned in closer. They don't even tell us why. Just follow the system. Lena, like we're machines. You know Gina's working double shifts 'cause her kid's inhaler ain't covered by insurance. And no one upstairs even knows she exists. Brian swallowed hard. Lena's voice cracked. Quiero now. I used to love this place. Used to feel like it mattered. Like we mattered. But now it's just corporate bulls, tea in a chrome wrapper. The busboy said nothing. Just handed her a new stack of clean napkins. Lena looked over her shoulder, then added, I heard the CEO's some ghost anyway. Never seen him. Probably sipping espresso in Napa while we're out here drowning in syrup. Brian flinched. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even offended. He was ashamed. In the silence that followed, the waitress grabbed 2 plates home with pancakes. With the other, with greasy bacon and scrambled egg sand, headed to a nearby table with a plastic smile. The kind you wear when your insides are unraveling. He watched her closely. The way she moved fast, efficient, kind even when her heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. He had built this place to be different. A community. A family. So how had he become a stranger in his own story? There's more where this came from. Follow for stories that matter. Brian stayed long after his breakfast turned cold. He picked at his food. Not out of hunger, but habit. All his attention was on Lena Nauhau. She handled customers with grace. How she picked up napkins off the floor without complaint. How she gave the old man at table 7 an extra jam packet without charging him. She was good. Better than good. She had the kind of grit and presence you couldn't train into someone. That voice he'd overheard earlier worn down. Raw. Wasn't coming from laziness. It was coming from someone who cared too much for too long without anything coming back. After the lunch rush died down, Brian slipped out of his booth and wandered past the service station. A laminated employee schedule was thumbtacked to the corkboard. He scanned the names and saw hers. Lena Mora scheduled 6 days this week. Double shifts on Tuesday and Thursday. Something tugged at his memory. Morris. That last name rang a bell. Back in his car, parked 2 blocks away to maintain the disguise. Brian opened the employee database on his phone. Logging in through the corporate admin portal, he searched Morris, Lena, and there it was. Started June 2019. Position, server. Promoted team lead 2020 et demoted August 2023. Note, performance drop. Concerns about attitude. Manager comment, once promising, but has become difficult to manage. Sure. Brian frowned. He dug deeper into archived files, pulling her original hiring interview, internal memos, even an old staff photo from the company newsletter. Lena had once been a rising star. There was a video clip from 2020, her receiving a Customer Hero Award for staying overnight during a snowstorm to keep the diner open for emergency responders. She was younger then, smiling, big and proud, and standing next to one of the regional managers. Brian remembered that story. He'd seen the email chain. He'd even approved a $100 bonus as a thank you. Now here she was, barely hanging on, serving eggs to strangers while quietly collapsing inside. He scrolled further and found an old comment from a shift supervisor. Lena's the heart of this location. She brings coffee to customers before they ask. Always takes the new hires under her wing. The team's better because she's here. But something had shifted. She was demoted. No explanation in the file beyond vague words like attitude. And that tip complaint, was it a one-off frustration or part of a deeper pattern? Brian sat in the silence of his car, phone glowing in his hand. The hum of traffic outside a soft backdrop to his unraveling thoughts. He hadn't come here looking for a face. He'd come looking for trends. Ineficiencias, profit leaks. But now there was a name, a person, a story. And somewhere along the way, and he'd forgotten that's where all of this began. Brian waited until the crowd thinned, and Lena was wiping down the last of the booths. Her apron streaked with syrup and coffee stains like a badge of quiet resilience. He hadn't planned what he was going to say. He just knew he had to hear it from her, not as a CEO. It's not as some corporate figurehead, but as a man who might have let something precious slip through his fingers. He approached gently. "Excuse me." He started, voice low and unsure, still cloaked in his fake identity. "Mind if I ask you something? Off the record." Lena gave him a polite, practiced smile. "Sure. What's up?" He gestured around the diner. "You've been here a while, haven't you? Feels like you've seen this place change." Her smile faded, just slightly. "Yeah, 5 years. You start to notice when things shift." He sat across from her booth, She didn't protest. Something in his eyes must have looked safer. Maybe she was just too tired to care anymore. If I told you someone up top actually wanted to know what went wrong down here, would you tell him the truth? She studied him, then shrugged. I mean, if that someone actually listened. I'm listening, he said. There was a pause, a wall between them, but something cracked open. Lena leaned back against the booth, arms crossed. The words slow at first, then unstoppable. It used to feel like we mattered. Back when it was just two managers and a small team, the regional rep would stop in and ask about our kids. We had potlucks on Fridays. We stayed late for each other, picked up slack. It wasn't perfect, but it felt good. She looked past him for a second, lost in memory, and then corporate changed. Systems changed. Everything became about numbers. Efficiency, performance scores. They bumped my pay a quarter and doubled my responsibilities. I trained new hires, and they got promoted over me. When I asked why, they said my tone was too strong, that I pushed back too much. Her jaw tensed. You want to know what really happened? I spoke up about the schedule being unfair, about how the AC didn't work for 3 weeks last summer, about Gina's kid being in the ER and her not getting coverage. I guess that made me difficult. From Brian's chest tightened. I was told I needed to be more positive, that if I couldn't be a team player, maybe this wasn't the place for me anymore. Her eyes met his, so I stopped talking. I just kept my head down and served my tables. That's what they wanted, right? He couldn't respond not without revealing everything. But her pain hung in the space between them like steam over a hot griddle. Real, raw, unavoidable. You ever love something so much, she whispered, that it breaks your heart to see what it's become? He nodded, swallowing hard. More than she knew. If you believe in listening, really listening, don't miss what's coming next. Brian drove home in silence. The morning sun had long since faded into a dull, gray overcast, like the sky itself had gone somber. He sat in his car for over an hour after pulling into his driveway, of keys still in the ignition. The hands clenched on the steering wheel like he could somehow grip the past and make it change. Lena's words echoed in his head. You ever love something so much that it breaks your heart to see what it's become? That wasn't just her pain. It was his reflection. He built Maple and Main from a single corner diner in a forgotten part of town. He remembered repainting the walls himself, hauling in secondhand booths, and handing out free pie slices to every cop, nurse, and construction worker who walked in. It wasn't supposed to become a chain. But success has a way of making you forget the smell of burnt toast at 6 a.m. or the names of the people who carry the place on their backs. Somewhere along the climb, he'd stopped being the guy who fixed leaky sinks and started being the guy who approved scheduling software upgrades and quarterly growth targets. And Leneshe was the type he used to pray would walk through his doors. The kind of worker who gave more than she took, who didn't just clock in and out, she cared. She believed in the place until he made it impossible to. He opened her HR file again. Those vague performance notes. There were smoke screens, cop-outs. She hadn't changed. The culture had. The managers had. He had. Brian thought about the 2023 Leadership Summit in Chicago. He'd stood on a stage in a $1,000 suit and talked about people-first leadership while Lena was probably scrubbing out syrup trays with raw hands and wondering if she could afford her light bill. He felt nauseous. His phone buzzed with a calendar, reminder something about a quarterly review meeting next week. He silenced it, because what he needed wasn't another meeting. He needed to face what he'd allowed to rot under his own roof. He remembered a moment 3 years ago. During a site visit to another location, a young manager had pulled him aside and said, "The secret's not in the pancakes. Sire, it's in how you make your people feel. He'd nodded politely. They never returned. But now, Lena had said it again. In fewer words, and it hit like a freight train. It wasn't the food that made Maple and Maine matter. It was them. And he'd failed them. For the first time in a long time. Brian wasn't thinking like a CEO. He wasn't strategizing or calculating ROI. He was just a man. A man who saw clearly for the first time in years that somewhere between ambition and automation, he'd stepped on the very people he once vowed to lift up. And now, he had to decide if he had the courage to fix what he broke. For every mistake made, there's still a chance to do right. Follow for the turn you won't see coming. The next morning, Brian didn't bother with the disguise. No scruffy wig. No fake name. Just a crisp button-down. Jeans. And the face his employees hadn't seen in years. The moment he walked into the diner, the room paused. Forks stopped midair. The line cook peeked out from behind the pass-through window. Even the old man at table 7 looked up from his crossword. Lena was pouring coffee at a corner booth when she saw him. Their eyes met. She blinked once, then again. Recognition slowly crawling across her face like a storm cloud rolling in. He gave a small nod. She stiffened. Brian approached carefully, slowly, like a man crossing a minefield built by his own hands. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Lena crossed her arms. "Now you show up." He nodded, accepting the heat. "I deserve that. But please, 5 minutes." She looked around the room, then gestured toward the break area behind the kitchen. He followed her through the swinging doors, past the sizzling griddle, into the cramped back hallway where broken chairs went to die. She didn't sit. "I'm not here as the CEO," Brian began. "I'm here because I listened yesterday, and I realized something a lot of things that I should have seen years ago." She watched him, arms folded, walls back up. "You were right," he said, voice low, "about the tips, about corporate, about what we've become. I let numbers replace people. I let the culture rot. And people like you, people who kept this place alive when I was too busy shaking hands in boardrooms. You got buried in the fallout." Something flickered in her eyes. But she didn't soften. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "This is a written offer to reinstate you as team lead, with full back pay from the day you were demoted. And I've already approved a new tipping model loan that includes base hourly raises and shared gratuity pools, so servers aren't punished for price hikes." Lena didn't move. "I'm not just offering a title," he added. "I'm offering change. Real change. Starting now." She stared at the paper. Her face didn't light up. She didn't smile. Instead, she stepped back. "I don't want your guilt bonus," she said, and her voice sharp but steady. "You think this fixes it? A raise and a title?" I watched people break down in that walk-in freezer crying over medical bills. I watched Gina get her hours cut after asking for time off to care for her son. This isn't just about me. Brian's mouth opened, then closed. He had no rebuta. "I gave 5 years to this place." Lena continue, and her voice cracking now. "You gave us silence. Now you want forgiveness because you finally looked." Her words hit harder than he'd expected. He nodded, eyes heavy. "You're right," he said quietly. "And I'm not asking for forgiveness today. I'm asking for a chance to earn it." She stared at him, unmoved. "We'll see." And she turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the dim back hallway. The paper in his hand felt heavier than ever. Not all apologies are accepted, but some are worth fighting for. Don't miss what happens next. The door to Brian's corporate office shut with a heavy click behind him. He didn't sit. Not yet. His executive assistant hovered nearby. I'm surprised by the urgency in his voice earlier that morning. Clear my week. He had said, cancel the board calls, the finance meetings, all of it. He pulled out a legal pad and began to write. Not a memo, not a press release. A confession to the staff of Maple and Maine. It began with truth. No corporate spin. No diluted language. Just raw honesty. I failed you. Elect policies replace people. And spreadsheets replace stories. And while we celebrated growth, we forgot who built it. You. He emailed the letter to every employee across all 30 locations and posted a printed copy in every break room. Personally signed, but that was just the first spark. By week's end, Brian stood in front of the entire diner staff this time, not as Gus the stranger or Brian the absent CEO, but as a man ready to rebuild what he'd let fall apart. Lena wasn't there. Not yet. Still, he pressed forward. He announced a new tip-sharing policy. All FOH staff would receive an automatic 18% share from total sales during peak hours, plus an optional customer tip. Lineno, more penalties for menu pricing, hourly base pay increases for all servers. Effective, immediately. A wellness relief fund, created to assist employees dealing with emergencies, medical prasana, housing, childcare, fully funded by executive bonuses, including his own, a grievance hotline, anonymous and direct to an external HR partner, not management, mandatory leadership retraining for every regional and store manager. Then came the part that stopped everyone in their tracks. I'm reopening this store under new expectations. Not just for service, but for how we serve you. This isn't about winning back customers. It's about earning back our people. The line cook nodded slowly. Gina, the cashier with the asthmatic son, wiped away tears. The busboy who hadn't spoken more than 5 words all week whispered, "Whoa." Still, Brian knew the hardest part hadn't come yet. He walked back behind the counter, grabbed a Sharpie, and began crossing out the old specials board. Then he wrote, in bold letters, today's special. Dignity comes first. By the following Monday, videos of his speech had started circulating online. One of the customers had recorded it and shared it on social media. The clip went viral, not because of flash or flare, because it was real. Comments poured in. This is how you lead. Tears. Actual tears. If more CEOs acted like this, the world would be different. But Brian didn't read most of them, because the only comment he truly cared about hadn't been made yet. It belonged to someone who wasn't in the room that day. Someone who had once called this diner home. If you've ever hoped people could change, keep watching. The moment you've waited for is next. The breakfast rush on Monday was loud coffee brewing, plates clattering, laughter trickling back into the corners of the diner like morning sunlight through dusty blinds. But Brian wasn't behind his desk, at corporate. He was standing at the host, stand in jeans and rolled up sleeves, helping seat guests, wipe menus, and refill napkin dispensers. He didn't want distance anymore. He wanted to feel the pulse of the place again. He was greeting a young couple with a baby carrier when he heard the bell above the front door ring. He turned without thinking and froze. Lena stood in the doorway. Same apron, same tired eyes. But today, something was different. Her posture straighter, her jawless tight, still guarded. Yes, but present. The entire diner seemed to pause. She stepped inside slowly, like someone testing the ground after a storm. A few coworkers noticed and gave her soft, Surprised. Smiles. The cook in the back peeked out from behind the pass window. The new hostess whispered her name under her breath, like seeing a ghost. Brian approached, be careful not to crowd her. Didn't expect to see you today. He said, Voice Kie. I didn't expect to come. She replied, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on the new sign behind the counter. People first. Always. Then to the whiteboard listing the week's new staff policies. She gave a soft, skeptical scoff. So, what? All of that was real. He nodded. Every word. She crossed her arms. And what happens when the camera phones go away? When the applause dies down? Is this just a PR fix? He didn't answer right away. Just looked her in the eyes. Steady. You don't owe me your trust, he said, but you deserve a workplace where it's earned back. Every single day. And if I mess that up again, you'll know. The silence between them stretched long, thick with unsaid things. Then Lena looked around. The way the morning light hit the counter, the way a new server helped a struggling co-worker carry coffee refills, the way Gina smiled, just slightly, from behind the register. Like hope had snuck back into her lungs. Table 6 still have the wobbly leg. She asked. Brian blinked. Yeah. Still leans left. She exhaled slowly and walked toward the back, tying her apron around her waist in one smooth motion. I'll fix it after the rush. And she called over her shoulder. And just like that, she was back. Not because he convinced her, but because she chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, something broken could be rebuilt. Brian stood there for a moment, as a lump in his throat, watching her melt back into the rhythm of the place like she never left. Only now, the floor she stood on was finally starting to feel solid again. Some returns aren't just comebacks, they're homecomings. If this touched you, follow for more stories that matter. The change didn't come all at once. It came like the first signs of spring quiet. Steady. Impossible to ignore. A little more laughter behind the counter. A little less silence in the break room. And in the middle of it all, Lena. She didn't return to her old position right away. She didn't want the title or the back pay, at least not yet. She wanted to see if the words matched the actions. So she clocked in as a server. Same role, same section. But this time, something was different. The staff leaned in. The new hires asked her questions. The veterans started showing up early again. Brian noticed how the place started to feel like the diner he remembered building, one where people weren't just showing up for paychecks, but because they belonged. One afternoon, Lena called a team meeting after the lunch rush. Everyone assumed it was the Ventol habits die hard. But instead, she stood in front of the crew, marker in hand, and drew a circle on the whiteboard. This is the floor map, she said, but it's also a trust circle. If one section is on fire, we all get burned. So here's what I propose. She outlined a rotating team support model, backup servers during rush, shared checkouts, and a collaborative tip pool trial. Brian watched from the back of the room, silently impressed. This wasn't just initiative. This was leadership. But Lena wasn't doing it for the promotion. She was doing it because she loved this place again. And Brian, he was different now too. He no longer hid in offices or disappeared into quarterly meetings. He spent one day a week working in a different location. Apron on, phone off. Not to monitor, to understand. He sat with Gina during her breaks, met her son, added him to the wellness fund without fanfare. He asked the dishwasher, Carlos, what the hardest part of his job was. Carlos said, standing for 10 hours straight without a break. The next day, Brian approved 2 new positions relief. Renersto rotate breaks into every shift. It wasn't just better. It was human. Customers noticed too. One woman left a note on her receipt. The energy here is different. I feel it. You're doing something right. And through it all, Lena kept showing up. Not just on time, but present. One night, as they cleaned up after a long day, she turned to Brian at the sink. Both of them elbow deep in soap suds. You know, she said, it doesn't feel like your diner anymore. He raised an eyebrow. She smirked. It feels like ours. And for the first time in years, Brian felt like he'd finally earned the right to smile back. The diner wasn't perfect, but it was alive again. And this time, no one, especially not the people who built it, would be left behind. When people rebuild together, the future becomes something worth believing in. Subscribe for more stories that give you hope. The diner buzzed with a familiar hum plates clinking, laughter bouncing off the tile walls, the smell of cinnamon and sizzling bacon curling through the air. But today felt different. It was Lena's last day as a server. Brian stood by the front register, hands in his pockets, watching as she helped an elderly man into his booth. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't wearing that invisible armor anymore. Her kindness didn't come with a cost. It was just her present. Calm, full of quiet pride. When her shift ended, the entire team gathered near the counter. Brian stepped forward with a small box, tied with blue ribbon. He handed it to her, his voice steady. You've led this team for a long time without the title. It's time we made it official. She opened the box. Inside was a new name tag, glinting in the light. Lena, general manager. The room erupted in cheers. She looked up at Brian, emotion rising in her chest. You sure about this? He smiled. You were never just a waitress. You were always the soul of this place. I'm just sorry it took me so long to see it. Tears brimmed in her eyes. But she laughed through them. Then I guess we're even... As the team surrounded her with hugs and high fives, a little girl sitting with her family nearby leaned toward her mom. Is she the boss now? The girl asked. Her mom smiled. She's earned it. Brian looked on, a heart full. The past couldn't be changed. But the future, it had never looked brighter. People aren't replaceable. They're the reason you ever had something worth building. If this story moved you, consider subscribing. Sometimes, second chances don't just heal people, they heal places too.